Okay, so today we're looking at text 8.1, which is the Flemmich Webb reviewing the Boxer Handsome novel. Okay, so in terms of the gap, this is a newspaper-based review which has been reproduced online. The audience is obviously going to be readers of The Independent, potentially fans of Webb, who's reviewing it, and also those people with a literary interest in newly published novels, or perhaps those people with an interest in boxing too. The purpose is to inform, and because it's a review, it's also really important that it offers critical appraisal. Now, because it's a positive review, there's also a sense that the purpose is that this is to persuade people to buy the novel. What we can see here in the opening is that we've got the print conventions of a book review. We've got the author's work cited and discussed with points of reference, including background to the author's work and the text provenance. We also get a kind of linear structure throughout. So we get an introduction to the work, and then it develops with points of, it develops with themes, talking about the themes with quotations, and concludes with a nice little neat summing up that echoes the introduction. So these kind of structural features fit in with what we would expect from a review. Now what you can see, it's got a little code here highlighted in green. We've got all of the lexis that comes from the semantic field of violence, okay, and some of those are specifically lexis drawn from boxing as well. So what we'd be expecting it then is in the introduction that Webb is going to make it really clear what he thinks about the novel, and that is absolutely what happens. Okay, so we get a bit of background info. So it's her first novel. It's inspired by her grandfather, John Poppy, a young featherweight boxer. This familial connection gives this exciting debut an authenticity which, allied to a confident writing style, suggests Whitwham has a promising future ahead of her. So we can really see the critical appraisal coming through in here, okay? We've got the adjectives, exciting and confident, giving us this positive point of view. So this is the critical judgment which we're expecting, and that's meeting the genre conventions. We've also got this noun, authenticity, okay, which is again giving us that critical point of view. This is a genuine novel, so this is a real kind of positive review. And also we're told that she has got a promising future, so we've got another positive adjective there, just in case we weren't sure, it making it really clear, okay, that Webb thinks this is a really great book. What we've also got in the opening is lots of proper nouns. Okay, so we've got the boys club, we've got Hoxton, we've got John Poppy, and that kind of continues through. They're all highlighted in blue for you as well. And what that does is it gives it a real authenticity. Okay, it's one of the things that he's praising for her, is that there's this authenticity. Now, because it's inspired by her grandfather, what Webb's suggesting is that it gives it this real sense of time and place, and that it really reflects the kind of period that she's writing about. Okay, so kind of like intertextual references. So initially we hear that he's a young featherweight boxer, so they're that specific boxing lexis, and then we get more of that in the second paragraph as well. So you've got amateur boxers, they fight, and then it becomes a little bit more kind of poetic, the flurry of fists, bare-knuckled and brutal. So these, in terms of semantic field, this is more generally about fighting rather than being specifically about boxing. And then we've got a victorious act of brutality. Okay, so here, this metaphor is an interesting one, isn't it? The flurry of fists. There's those lovely fricative sounds that are alliterated there. This kind of swirling mass of fists really connotes an intense brutality. You could also say that the fricative sound creates this hissing noise, which really befits the aggression that's being described as well. So after that flicative alliteration, we then get a plosive one, bare-knuckled and brutal. Brutal, we'll see, we've got brutal, we've got brutality. It's also repeated later on as well. So what Webb's really doing is emphasising the kind of violence and the cruelty of this world, and the plosive sounds here in bare-knuckled and brutal is also helping us. You kind of have to spit those plosive sounds out, don't you? So it's really reflecting the brutality of the world that is being described. Okay, so this is also, in terms of what's happening here, it's telling us a little bit about the characters and the setting. Okay, so where they are, that these characters. Bobby's fighting with Connor over a girl. They're in the same boxing club in East London. Okay, so that also fits with the kind of genre conventions of a review. And then it becomes a little bit more thematic, I suppose. So Whitwham acknowledges the value of boxing in society, giving wayward kids a focus, trainers acting as father figures to young men. Okay, so the parenthesis here is really used for explanation and detail. Through Derek, who runs the Clapton Bow Boys Club and keeps an eye out for Bobby and his other charges. So this idiom of keeping an eye out really reflects the kind of informality that is there in their relationship. It's like a familial thing, yeah, like a paternal one. Okay, so we've got the positives thematically of like what boxing can provide, but there's then a juxtaposition, and this fronted conjunction is really establishing this juxtaposition. But she doesn't shy away from its brutal side, so we've got the brutality repeated yet again, and the thin lines. We've got another idiom here that separates regulated fighting in the ring from unfettered fighting outside it. Okay, so this idiom is really emphasizing for us that the violence of boxing really easily filters over into the streets. Unfettered also suggests that it's not confined or restricted, so that really shows us the wildness of it and fits in with the brutality. Interesting language choice here to describe them as casualties of this world. Okay, so that's really got connotations of war and violence, and actually if we go back up here, I missed this out, sorry, we've got the verb allied, okay, which again fits in with this idea of war. So whilst we have got a semantic field of boxing and violence more generally, there is also some lexis that's to do with war, making this comparison obviously about the kind of brutality and the savagery of boxing. So casualties of this world lay strewn throughout the world. Strewn here, this is really showing us the kind of carelessness of it. It's kind of untidily scattered everywhere, and that carelessness with which kind of human beings are treated really creates a bleak mood, which I think reflects the bleakness that is present in the novel. Joe, Bobby's father, was once a decent boxer himself, but is now a sad alcoholic, a broken shell of a man with none of the respect that his fists once commanded. So we've got a real juxtaposition here, haven't we, between what he was. So we've got the adjective decent to let us know that he used to be, but actually now he's a sad alcoholic. So he's been completely destroyed by his experience. He's totally empty of hope. And that's reinforced with this metaphor, isn't it? A broken shell of a man. And that fits in with the kind of war connotations that we've had previously with casualty and allied. And just really emphasizes how much he's been destroyed by his experience, with none of the respect that his fists once commanded. So again, that's kind of military war lexis. Bobby's mother, a victim of domestic abuse at the hands of Joe, sees history repeating itself as her son follows in his dad's footsteps, a slave to the code of honor that this macho world demands. So here we really see, with the idea of them being a slave, that in a sense this kind of maleness is oppressive, okay, and the adjective macho means kind of like overly assertive or aggressive, okay. And what this metaphor is doing is it's establishing the author and the author's kind of partial contempt of this world. You know, we've seen that there are some positive things in it, but actually what the author's showing us is that there are some really destructive things in this world too. Then we get this intertextual reference to Shakespeare, to Coriolanus, and the important bit, okay, as well as there being this intertextuality, okay, so that's important. That lets us know that the readers of this review, and then potentially the readers of the novel itself, are going to be obviously literary, and they're going to understand this reference to Shakespeare. It is clarified for us a little bit, okay, because they let us know that there's this emotionally stunted warrior, okay. Now, if you know the play, there's a contrast between the military prowess and then the poor leadership skills, which kind of mirrors the contrast between there being, you know, being a decent boxer, being good at fighting, but actually not being any good at the kind of social, emotional aspects of life. Again, warrior, okay, so we've got more of this lexis which is around war. And then this kind of fits in with what I was saying about not having the kind of emotional skills. So when he meets a local girl, Chloe, he suddenly glimpses an alternative to the world he has inhabited since birth. The tragedy is that he lacks the emotional skills to seize this chance. Okay, so this also fits in with the genre conventions of a review. We're finding a little bit about the characters, a little bit about the plot, but without giving too much away. And Whitman's writing is as sharp as a 1-2 combination. Okay, so really nice use here by Webb of boxing terminology to complement the power of her writing, and that's furthered with the short, punchy sentences that effectively capture the brooding atmosphere of the East End. Here we get this triadic structure. Okay, we've got the brooding atmosphere of the East End, the threat of violence at every turn, and the savagery of the fighting. This is really layering up the violence, okay, making Webb's perspective quite clear. And then we get a quotation, okay? Then he cracked the bridge of his nose wide open, skin split, blood spat, Connor stumbled about, headless. You know, we would expect if you were reviewing a novel that you would include some quotations from it. And this is a quote that's been chosen to kind of emphasize this here, really emphasizing the savagery of the fighting. But, so again, we've got a fronted conjunction. This has all been about how violent the book is, and then there's a shift here again. But the book is tended to, a change of pace that deepens the emotional resonance of the characters. Bobby is uncharacteristically unsure of himself when he first takes Chloe on a date. She had a grip on him, a spell that held him in awkward moments he couldn't get out of. So just an important reminder from Webb that actually the whole thing isn't about violence too. That's important, isn't it? There needs to be that kind of counterplay, really, for it to engage the readership. And then this is a really important sentence in terms of the genre conventions and the linear structure. So this is a promising debut. That's a repetition of the same adjective that we had in the opening. So we can see here that Webb is clearly summing up. And it will be interesting to see how Whitwham handles subject matter in subsequent novels that is more distant from her own experience. So he's like, yeah, this is great. I really like this novel. Let's see if she can do as well again when she's doing something that she has to imagine more than something that she's got real experience of.